Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
We're on episode 67, Phil, and certainly looking at the headlines over the last 7 days, there's no shortage of stuff happening out there, is there? I mean, I'd even say that the last 7 days is starting to feel like a typical week in the motor trade because there's so much going on. And looking at the headlines to cover this week, there's quite a few that we're not going to have time for. So we'll try and review those next week.
And it's been some big stories as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I mean, we're giving a shout out to David Billsborough for last week and stepping in to whilst you enjoyed a few days in the sun. And David, obviously, owner of Cheshire Cars. But I kind of wanted to chat to him about the market, but there were some headlines that we kind of needed to cover because they were big headlines and relevant. And so I was trying to fit it into this conversation with David last week.
Yeah, and many thanks to David for sitting in for me. I mean, it sounds though you two had a good time, and that second half where you're chatting about the used car market. I mean, you could have done another hour on that quite easily. I could tell.
Well, yeah, it was that. We're getting close to that, and yeah, because I wanted the second half was really trying to chat to David about what he's seen in the market, how he's finding things, etc., from an independent dealer's perspective, and. But yeah, it was a good chat, good conversation as always with David. But as you know, Curtis, David, and I can both talk a lot, so we were I was very conscious of that. But no, it was a good conversation, and David's such a lovely bloke.
He is, yeah,
and steps in when needed.
And this week we've got the first halves from Virtue Motors, which we're just going to give a little shout out to. So it's the first half to the 31st of August. And you've got a few details on this because these landed just as we started recording.
Yeah, and we'll probably catch up with Robert in due course to talk about a bit of an update on things in general from Robert as we like to do. But yeah, there's a few bits, and you can head over to. I mean, it is in some of the headlines this week, and you can head over to the Virtues website and look at the investors page, and there's both a video interview there with Robert plus the highlights from the interim results. But he does comment, there's a few good comments in here that are talking about obviously the group like-for-like retail sales volumes of battery electric vehicles grew 82.4%, and that's compared to the UK's BEV retail sales growth of 55.2%. So obviously that represents a major market gain in growth for their EV segment and vehicles, and they're saying that vehicles have improved remarkably for the business in there. They also talk a lot about the 0.6 million in used car gross profit generation. Was a good performance given supply constraints. So that was an increase of 0.6 million there. So good performance there. And one of the other points in here is the comment about that they've appointed two new managing director roles that will be taking responsibility from the 1st of January 2026. And what I understood from the interview there with Robert is these are managing director roles, two of that will be reporting into Robert, and then the divisionals will be reporting into these two new managing directors. And it doesn't say who they are, but they are internal promotions. So everyone will be guessing if it's some musical chairs across the sector, but it isn't. It's internal promotions. Yeah. So again, a great move there, because I think Robert's, he's talking about the size of the business now, their turnover. It's a big business now that Robert's running there with his senior leadership team, and he's looking at how he can efficiently strengthen that team at the top.
Yeah, and as you say, we'll put a link to the Virtue Motors website in the newsletter that goes out on Monday.
And also coming up, and I only found out about, well, I knew about it, and we both knew about it, but actually I'd missed it in my diary. Was the AM Live? It's just around the corner. I think that's our annual get together, isn't it?
It is, yes, yeah. So 12th of November, Birmingham NEC. I'll be there early for a couple of coffees, and hopefully you and I can bump into each other and do another selfie, mark another 12 months passing.
Yes, yeah, it tends to be that way, doesn't it? So I do intend to try and get in and out fairly quickly, but I do
Yeah.
struggle. But I have now got it in my diary. I'm quickly trying to move other meetings that I arranged that day. For whatever reason, I didn't have it in my diary. But anyway, it's there now.
Yeah,
So
but if you haven't been, it's definitely worth a visit because you've got the networking there, which is it's just great because the whole industry is pretty much there.
yeah,
But they also have some really really good speakers sessions. So if you haven't been, then do look into it. It's on the AM website and it's the 12th of November.
definitely. So we had the interview with Steve Young this week, didn't we?
We did, yeah. Now, I've always enjoyed the interviews we've done with Steve Young. So Steve Young is the MD of ICDP, but from March this year, he also became the MD of Auto West London, which is the Omoda and JQ dealership. So our conversation is sort of in two parts. So first half, we talk about what's happening in the sector, and then the second half, he talks about the business. So the business opened in March, so they've done their first 6 months, and of course the September plate change. So it covers a lot, and it's all very topical. So do look out for that. It's in your podcast feed. It landed during the week.
Yes. And finally, it is Menable Week this week. So Stephen Whitton has got a different kind of Menable moments this week. So have a listen to that in support, that halfway point there. So stay tuned for this week's Menable moments from Stephen Whitton.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And companies recently featured in our supplier specials include Prospecting Dynamics, the CRM specialist led by Nancy Rignall, and they're working with some of the UK's biggest dealer groups. We've had iVendi, the motor finance tech provider, ETT, who are shaking up AI dealer call handling, and Generational, the EV battery health test provider. So if you would like your company to be featured on our supply specials, then just contact Philip or myself. Either message us on LinkedIn or email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from AM, Car Dealer, Most Trader and BBC News. Now, we have a show of two halves today, starting with a look at the SMMT data for the new car and van markets during the September plate change. And we've also got Motors Market View analysis of used car trends over the month. After the midway break, we'll have the details of the FCA motor finance redress scheme, which were released earlier this week. Renault and Dacia are the latest OEMs to be hit by a cyber attack with customer data hacked. And we'll finish with a look at the rise in EV pre-registrations. So first story this week is from AM Online, and the headline there is almost 2 in 5 of September's 75 plate cars have a plug, SMMT data shows. So this is AM's review of the September plate change, which I do urge you to head over to AM for the full story, because there's a lot of detail behind the figures, and they do actually include some of the SMMT graphs, graphs and charts, some of the data charts, which are definitely worth looking at. But the AM angle is very much looking at plug-in cars. So plug-in cars accounted for 35.5% of September's registrations, and that's recorded the strongest plate change September since 2020. So overall, registrations were 312,687 units, and that was up 13.7%. So a strong market there. And as I say, AM very much looking at the plug-in side. So BEVs accounted for nearly 1 in 4 registrations at 23%, while plug-in hybrid demand rose most rapidly to account for 1 in 10, so 12% of the market. But it does go on to say that new car orders for petrol and diesel cars was still double that of BEVs at 153,917 units versus 72,779 units.
Yeah, as you say there, I mean, it's all about this battery electric vehicle and plug-in hybrid market this September, because as you say there, that plug-in hybrid electric market just in September, percentage growth year on year went from 24,488 last year to 38,308 this year. That's a 56.4% increase. So, as you say there, a large rise there. And behind that was the hybrid electric vehicle market, which is up 23.5% up to 47,883 units there. And as Curtis points out there, that BEVs took a market volume of 72,779. Now, where does that leave us year to date? That's the crucial bit. But year to date, the overall market is up 4.2%. So that's up from 1.514 million last year up to 1.578 this year. But your BEVs are showing us a 22.1% market share, which obviously for those that follow the ZEV mandate or the VETs, that's shy of the 28% target for 2025. However, we know the complexity that's behind that in terms of the connection with the VETs mandate and the CAFE target, and the way manufacturers can buy credits and swap credits and borrow future. So, I think all in all, it's going to be there. We know that there won't be many manufacturers facing large fines at the end of this year. But all in all, that electric market, if you look at it black and white, is still falling short of that 28%.
Yeah, and worth pointing out that it's up from 18% last year, so moving in the right direction. And as you say, there's going to be a lot of bean counters going through the numbers at the end of the year to work out credits and who can buy credits from which other brands. So it will balance out and will be there or thereabouts maybe. And looking at registrations by sector, so fleet again was very much the star performer, because fleet registrations were up 17%, giving them a 56% market share. Retail was up 9% with a 42% market share, and business registrations to those smaller sub-25 vehicle fleets was up 28%, taking a 2.5% market share. So strength there across all three sectors, but really, really driven by the fleet sector, which we've seen throughout the year now.
Well, conscious of today's jam-packed headlines and the interview clips, some of the key messaging and stories that are coming out this week is that the performance from the BYD, the JQ and the Moda out there. And if you look at that top 10 model performance for September, I mean, they're just in there, aren't they, now straight away, Curtis?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because this is a chart that was always dominated by Ford and Vauxhall, with VW creeping in as well. But number 4, we've got a JQ7 with 6,500 units sold. The Ford Puma, interestingly, number 2 with 8,310 units. I would I would suggest that will be even stronger next month, because, as we know, that's the only vehicle that qualifies for the top grant under the ECG scheme. So we'll look at that next month. But the overall top seller was the Kia Sportage, with 9,455 units. And you mentioned BYD. I mean, they're in at number 6 with the Seal, but they had a phenomenal month, because they had 11,271 registrations, which made the UK BYD's biggest international market outside of China for the month of September. But that means that they outsold the likes of Citroën, Dacia, Fiat, Honda, Mini, and Tesla. So absolutely phenomenal month. Likewise, MG, they had a good month, selling 14,577 units, and that actually put them ahead of Mercedes and Nissan. So we are seeing a shift here, aren't we, in terms of OEMs and market shares?
We definitely are. So I'd always, if you get the news release from SMMT, within that is a download which will give you the whole September by manufacturer and year to date by manufacturer, with market share and volume. It's always an interesting one to see, where the market share is shifting between those OEMs and that annual growth. But from an international marketplace, and we always look at what's happening, particularly across the 4 markets in Europe there. So France saw a marginal growth of 1% up to 140,400. Germany, double-digit growth there with a 12.8% increase up to 235,500. Italy, 4.1% increase up to 126,700. And Spain, 16.4% increase, lower in volume at 85,200. And just to put context on a few things, US, 1.3 million in the month of September, and that's a 5.8% increase year on year. So some big positive growth across the market there when you start to look outside of the UK.
But you know what, Phil? If only we had a franchise dealer boss to talk about the September plate change. Well, we have. So here's an extract from our interview with Steve Young, MD of Auto West London, the Chiswick-based Amoda and JQ showroom, talking about his site's 1st September.
I mean, Steve, we chatted a little bit before we started to record, but we're obviously going to have you back on without obviously getting an update on how Auto West London, the business that you run, is bedding in. I mean, you opened it in March as a new site representing JQ and Amoda in Chiswick, and now you've just obviously had the second plate change of the year. I mean, how did September go, and how has it performed for the business?
Well, we didn't really get to play in the March registrations, because we only got everything together finally in the 3rd week of March. So most of the fun had finished. But the team have done an amazing job. I mean, the product is good, and you see that. It's JQ J7, 4th best-selling car in September in the UK market. I mean, it's just amazing for a product that's only been on the market for 6 months. And it's not as if it's being, distressed particularly. Yeah, I mean, there's some good deals on it, but it's not silliness. It's not all fleet market. We do virtually nothing in the fleet market. But we've got in September we did over 150 sales, or 150 registrations. If you take that an annualized level, it's sort of 900 units a year, which is amazing for a 6-month-old business. Obviously, we're very fortunate in terms of the location we're in. We're fortunate that we have the backing of Chetas, so we're not a typical startup in that respect. But it just does show what the opportunities are. And, from our point of view now, it's the question of, with the Chiswick site sort of on track to, be over 1,000 sales next year probably, then where's the next opportunity? And that brings us back to what we were discussing before the break.
I love the way, Phil, that he said, so we didn't have chance to play in the March market. I think from memory, they opened the doors during the second or
He
third
did,
week.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's probably
But,
quite glad of that, really, to be fair, because I think
yes.
giving him the March as well as the September might have been just a little bit too much for Steve. I think it's been he's had an interesting time, but you do need to listen to that full interview, don't you, Curtis, to get sort of an idea of some of the complexities and challenges that he's faced in the UK starting that operation. But on the other side, what a performance in the first 6 months of his operating a business, and obviously the September plate as well.
Yeah, and he really has got a unique perspective as an analyst who had been advising dealer groups and dealers on retailing in the UK and indeed Europe. And now he's retailing himself as the boss of a dealership. So it's a fascinating interview. So do check it out, because there's plenty of insight there. Staying with the registrations, we'll just take a quick look at how the van market performed in September. And Motor Trader's headline is "Tough Economy and Weak Business Confidence Hit September Van Sales." So that does kind of tell the story. And, I think, pretty much throughout the year, we've been reporting on those month-on-month drops for van registrations, and this does very much continue the trend. So registrations for September were down 2%, with 47,418 vans, pickups and 4x4s registered, and that year-to-date figure was 9.8% down, and that's according to the piece. And the SMMT analysis was down to tough economic environment and weak business confidence.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I was on an SMMT webinar as a guest speaker this week, and me and Matthew Crouch are there. We're talking about this, and I think you've got to realise that, with the way the economy is at the minute, you talk about that business pressure, business confidence. Well, those are all operators of fleet vehicles, vans in a lot. They're not. We've got the budget due on the 26th of November. And there's a lot of caution at the minute of, what is going to come out of that, and how much of it will put additional financial pressure onto that business sector from what we've seen already in the last financial and the economic update from the government. So you can see why that market is just under quite a bit of pressure at the minute, as businesses just find themselves under heavy costs coming into the business in addition to everything else.
Yeah, definitely. And the silver lining for the month was new EV registrations, because they're actually up 41% year on year to 4,262 units. And that's actually the most ever recorded in a single month. And that equated to a 8.9% market share by fuel. So, a good solid performance there for EVs.
Yeah, we'll have a chat about that on our last story when we talk about pre-reg activity, Curtis, but stay tuned for that one. So the next story is looking at the Motors September market view roundup. And I know you are involved with this with Motors there, but we're focus on the data, because I think sometimes we're trying to get across the market. There's some very rich data in these reports.
Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll put a link to the data in the newsletter that goes out Monday, so you can view it online as a PDF. And as Phil says, it is detailed, and it does cover quite a lot of sectors, a lot of areas of strategic importance and interest to dealers. But overall, the analysis shows that September proved to be a stable month for the used car market, with the market view identifying just minimal fluctuations across prices, days to sell, and dealer stock levels, which are the three main criteria that it analyses every single month. So the average price of a used car listed on Motors was £17,625, and that was down just 0.4% or £68 month on month, but it was actually up 2% year on year. And that rise was mostly driven by EVs, which increased month on month by value by 1.8%, which equates to £315 to £25,547, although this actually represented a year-on-year drop of 8.5%. Again, as we see EV values starting to level out. And just quickly looking at stock levels, they increased by just 1 unit to 51, while days to sell were unchanged month on month at 30 days, with the fastest sales actually achieved by car supermarkets in 19 days. So, as I say, the full data is in the report, and we will provide a link in the newsletter on Monday.
Yeah, definitely urge any dealer that's looking at their own profile or looking at where they sit against the general market, then yes, very worth reading there. But we're going to be back after this break from Menable Moments, Stephen Whitten.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, and on your podcast feed. Next up is our latest Menable moment, looking at mental wealth and well-being awareness and best practice in the automotive sector. With me, Stephen Whitten. Hello, it's Menable Moments time again. Hope you're well. Is anyone out there? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? I am joking, of course, pulling your leg a little bit, because I've got to say, I do dip in and out sometimes of thinking that this whole mental wealth stuff and Menable is getting some traction, and the industry is interested, is listening, and so on. And then I get pulled back and reminded that no, it actually is, and an impact is being made. But we've got a lot going on, haven't we? We've got a lot going on, and even this week I've had leaders who have had to postpone workshops and move things around just purely because the pressures of the business are literally getting in the way of us doing some stuff around their people and their well-being. And I totally get that. I totally understand that. And that's the reason why I'm not in that environment anymore, because it isn't conducive to my mental wealth. But all I can do is to work with those leaders, to give them the tools, to give them the mindset shift, let's be honest, and also help them with the understanding and acceptance that they need to help their businesses run as proficiently and as productively as possible, but at the same time have well-being and their people high up on the agenda. And that's what a mentally wealthy business is all about. So I'm delighted that this week, actually the day I'm recording this, I'm going to be speaking at the Motor Novo Extra Mile Conference in the Midlands, where they are bringing together a whole bunch of their customers, their clients, accounts, dealers, and so on. And included in that agenda even, is a lot of stuff around well-being, around shifting the culture and shifting the mindset around getting the most out of our people in this sector. So that again is one of the little reminders that says to me, keep going, Steve, you're doing well, it's okay. Mental wealth, it's a big subject, and it's something that not everyone's going to get and embrace straight away, but those that do really genuinely are seeing some fantastic outcomes. Now, a little bit of sad news this week, and that is that I have literally just heard this morning of the death of a young car sales executive who I knew, had the pleasure of working with a little bit, and I'm not going to go into it too much because there are rumours going around of what is the surrounding detail about that his death. But to suffice it to say, again, that's another little reminder of, although much of whatever the circumstances may have been are outside of his work in the industry and outside of his employer, nonetheless, that stuff hits hard and is a reminder of the fragility of life and how literally fragile all of us are. And there's so much going on in the world at the moment, isn't there, that we all get a reminder of that every single day. So again, do what you can to build the mental wealth and the resilience and the dare I say, toughness, if you like, of the people around you. And that, as a leader, is incumbent on us, you, to do what you can there. And that's what we want to do to help. So we recently launched our Mental Wealth Pioneers program. That's an opportunity for you to join us and join many of your leader colleagues and peers across the industry to have these conversations and to look at, right, what do we need to do? And all we're asking in return for a small donation to the movement is for an hour of your time once a quarter to attend a Zoom meeting and work with some of your peers around the industry to get some ideas of what they're doing. And to lead up to that, I picked up a phrase from a book I read a year or so ago, written by a good friend of mine. And in there, she talks about becoming a great ancestor, doing what you can to leave an amazing legacy and an amazing story behind you. And everyone's got their story. Everyone's got the ability to leave something that says to the people following them in 50, 100, 200 years' time, look at what my ancestors did. Now, with that in mind, many of you may have seen a couple of posts about something that I've started doing, which is a little bit of a hobby, and it's now become a bit of a side hustle. And I've got to say, I bloody love it. And you can probably tell the change in energy just from me talking about it. And that is that I'm going to release to the world, and have done over the last few weeks, my little hobby, which is my drag act. Yes, Phil Curtis, I now officially am a drag artist. And I don't do it all the time. I'm not going to turn up to your automotive conference in makeup and a dress and a wig, unless you pay me very well. But that is a little side hustle of mine, and it is so much fun. It's absolutely hilarious to do, and people love it. And what I think people love about it is the fact that it gives them permission to be themselves. If a guy who is, and let's be honest, I'm approaching 50, and I'm approaching it from the wrong end. So if a guy at my age and stage of life and everything else with my backstory can get up on stage in a dress and a wig and a bit of makeup, it gives permission to other people to go, do you know what? It's okay for me to be who I am. And that is what mental wealth is really all about. It's about ensuring everyone is safe in automotive. So, bit of a roller coaster this time, but I want all of you to really embrace this idea of everyone safe always. And if you need any help and support with that, you know how to find me. Stephen J. Whitten on LinkedIn, or stephen.whitten@menable.org. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Well, I think Steve covered a lot of bases there, Phil, didn't he?
I don't know which way, I didn't know which way it was all going, but yeah, he covered quite a bit there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And as Steve says, and we do encourage you, do get in touch with him if you do need any work within your business on mental health, mental wealth, then do reach out to him. He's on LinkedIn a lot.
Yes.
So, but he does pick up messages. So do message him on LinkedIn, and he will get back to you.
Yeah. So getting back to the headlines now, the stories that we've got. There's a big one that's broken this week, and at the time of recording, there's been some information out on it, but it's still getting updated as the market review the content. But On Car Dealer, this is that FCA reveals how payouts will work as millions of car buyers due cash for unfair car finance deals. And this is that the city regulator announces details of compensation scheme for consumers, that some 14 million car buyers are set to receive payouts of £700, and details of how the scheme will work and who is in line for the money will be revealed. And that was revealed this week. Now, I believe it's a big document. I've not got my head around it all as yet. But obviously with this, there is a couple of points that we had we had Jonathan Butler from Geldars on, didn't we, on that special interview following the Supreme Court announcement, and Jonathan will be putting out further details once he's had time to look through all the detail and what it means. But obviously, I think you and I were talking before the show, weren't we, Curtis, that initially I think the FCA had said that it'll be up to £950 per claim. In this, they're talking about an average of £700 per claim. But also, I think the FCA initially, I think it was up to 14 billion or more than that. And Jonathan Jonathan from Geldars and Adrian Della from the FLA were challenging where they got their numbers from. But I think mixed up in this is obviously one, the redress, but two is the Johnson unfair side of things as well for those that are being significantly overcharged finance commission as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick in this, and there will be updates. I think we can guarantee that over the coming days on the implications. But what we do know is that the FCA expects the scheme will cost lenders £8.2 billion, with payouts starting as early as next year. And this is based on, so the compensation, the redress is based on 14.2 million agreements, and that's 44% of agreements made since 2007. So across that period that was under investigation. So there are significant there are significant figures involved here. As you say, the average will be 700, which is possibly lower on the sort of lower side of what certainly customers were expecting. So as we've yet to hear, their reaction, their feedback to this. But I think the reassuring thing is that it's now being set.
Yes.
And, we do know the details, and there will be some certainty. And it means that the finance providers can get on with that compensation. A lot of them, as we've reported over the months, they've ring-fenced amounts for these payouts, so they can now get on with that process and hopefully get back to normal at some stage.
Exactly. I mean, in the words of Jonathan Butler, they may not be cancelling. They may need to cancel that world cruise that they were expecting on the back of this.
Yeah.
But I think there is details. So as Curtis said there, it's for finance agreements between April the 6th, 2007 and the 1st of November 2024. That a discretionary commission arrangement which allowed the broker to adjust the interest rate the customer would pay to obtain a higher commission is one of them. High commission arrangement, 35% of the total credit and 10% of the loan is another area that is involved with this. And a contractual arrangement or tie between the lender and the broker, which provided exclusive or near exclusive rights to lenders to provide credit. So those are the kind of three criteria that have been detailed within the report there. So again, we will, by the time you get your newsletter on your feed on Monday morning, we'll probably try and find what the latest summary is and include that on the Monday morning's newsletter there for you, just to give the latest of the output of it.
And moving on to our next story, which is from BBC News, and it's Renault customers told to be vigilant after data hacks. So, yeah, unfortunately, we're reporting on another cyber attack, and certainly over the last few weeks, we've been covering the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack. And the latest on that, Phil, is that that phased restart of production is happening this week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's now underway.
But it is, I mean, again, I don't think the Renault Dacia one is it has got the headlines. Let's not kid ourselves. It's there, but it's not obviously initially to the scale of the impact on JLR. And again, if you look back to the Virtue interims, Robert does talk about the impact because they do represent JLR, and he talks about the financial costs to the business within the month of September as a consequence of that cyber attack that JLR faced. But again, I think we were saying within this story, this is customers' details, and it's not necessarily whether they bought a car, is it? This is if they've entered competitions with Renault Dacia or anything like that. That's what's being captured from this cyber attack with Renault Dacia, from my understanding.
Yeah, that's right. So data has been stolen in this cyber attack that targeted a third-party data processing provider. So within the BBC report, it says that no customer financial data or passwords or bank account details had been obtained. And Renault said within the story that other personal data had been accessed, and the car maker warned customers to be vigilant. And Renault went on to say that affected people would be notified, and that victims of the hack may include a wider pool of customers who had entered competitions or shared data with the company without necessarily purchasing a vehicle. So it looks as though it's a specific part of the database, and as you say, not as wide-ranging as the Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack, which, as we know, halted production across all its plants. But still another serious attack, and it's follows on from there's been attacks on Marks and Spencers, some of the big high street brands, and the brewing giant Asahi as well, the Japanese beer maker.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think obviously there's a lot of time and effort now going into insurance and cyber protection and things like that. I think, lots going on there. I don't think it's going to end there, do you, Curtis? I think.
Sadly not. No. Something really does need to be done now to stop these attacks. And if nothing else, it's certainly raised it on the agenda. Certainly with the OEMs, and I suspect with dealer groups.
Dealers as well, yeah. Everybody in the sector obviously has been targeted. And the final story, and this kind of it tails into what we talked about in terms of the registrations at the start of today's podcast. But this is covered by Amy Turner in AM Online. EV pre-registration is expected to surge by year end. And now this was picked up from the VRA, Vehicle Remarketing Association members meeting that I chaired and hosted recently down at the Toyota Burnaston manufacturing facility there down in Birmingham area, but in Derby, area. That and Rupert Pontin, who's the vice chair and represents Brago. Mike Frizzell was there, who's the chief executive of leasing.com. We were sort of looking at what's been happening in the market, and you and I talked about the June end of quarter, year end, half year point tactical activity that happened on the last day of the month, with 30% of the registrations happening on the final day of June. No surprise, Curtis. Similar happened in September.
Really? You surprised me.
Yeah.
Were those last few days of September busy? We see a lot of activity.
Yeah. I mean, indications from the market. I think just short of 25% were registered on the last day is an unofficial figure that is being muted. Some of the manufacturers were quite busy with it throughout the month, so they didn't want to leave it wrapped on the last minute. They were trying to get ahead of it. I think in general, I think it is now, as I put it, we are well and truly back to a push marketplace. I've had indications this week through a contact of mine that there are just short of 8,000 75 plate vehicles advertised across the dealer network. That's cars and commercials in that figure there. dominated by certain dealer groups and dominated by certain manufacturers. So, I think you only need to go onto the marketplaces, and I'm sure going onto Motors, you might see one or two 20, 25, 75 delivery mileage vehicles being marketed. So I think essentially it's very much back in the market. But, for me, they come with a used car, don't they, Curtis, at the end of it? So, I think positively, it's product, it's going into the marketplace. Yes, it could distress residual values. It does make that 0 to 6, 0 to 12-month-old market quite challenging by certain manufacturers because of the cost to pay and things like this. But, I think it's well and truly back on the table, and we'll probably expect more in Q4 as we head towards the year end.
Yeah, definitely. And Rupert Pontin does point the finger at EVs and the impact and pressure from the ZEV mandate. And he says it seems inevitable that some manufacturers with some models will be pushing out stock in an attempt to minimise their ZEV mandate exposure. And he goes on to say that, of course, this would put pressure on late plate values, but also introduce offers into the market that offer exceptional value for buyers. So the winners here really are the customers, aren't they? Anyone thinking of transitioning to an EV over the next 3 months, there's going to be some good offers out there.
There is, yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the Puma Gen E on the SMMT top 10 performers, and Mike Frizzell pointed out from a leasing.com perspective that the Gen E is one of the few models to qualify, obviously, for the 3750 grant, as you mentioned earlier, but it's in strong demand, and it's saying it's currently very well priced and amongst the best sellers on their platform. And you only need to hear when we talk about the volume and the order bank going into 2026 there of how that grant has really driven demand for that product. So some big headlines today, Curtis. We've got to get through it there. We had the Mabel bit in the middle. We've got Steve Young right at the start there with some big headlines in the middle there. But do listen to the Steve Young interview that landed on your podcast feed from early in the week. Steve is so good value. We get across a lot of content, a lot of conversation with Steve every time we manage to get him on. As Curtis said, we'll put a link in to the newsletter Monday morning for that interview with Steve if you've not managed to listen to it already. We'll put a link in for the interim results from Robert Forrester and Virtue, and we'll try and get Robert on in due course and talk about that and the wider market there. And we'll put the latest from the FCA announcement for the redress scheme in, as well as people review and understand the detail behind that report. So we'll try and get all that included on your newsletter on Monday morning, Curtis?
There's a lot of admin work there in between now and then, but that is all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next weekend, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.